Hello, 95 grammar students, and welcome to a new unit, Unit 6, Future Perfect and Future Perfect Progressive. Now, this unit will look and feel very similar as we went through the equivalent in the past at the very beginning of our time together in Unit 4. We talked about the past perfect and past perfect progressive. So the concept is going to be very similar. The only difference, of course, is rather than referring to the past, things that have taken place or were continuously taking place in the past. This time, it'll be with regard to the future perfect and future perfect progressive. The constructions, grammatical constructions, will be very, very similar. The suffixes of the words will be minor differences between those suffixes. So let's go ahead and dive in on what the outcomes are for Unit 6 to be able to describe events that will happen or will be in progress before a specific time in the future. You are all in the 95 level. You're taking 95 grammar, you're taking the 95 speaking and listening courses, perhaps 95 writing. What do you anticipate to be doing upon graduation? Let's make that the specific time in the future. When you're done with our program in a matter of months or perhaps maybe going into next semester, but when that time comes, and you gotta be excited, what will happen? Or what will you be doing? What will be in progress upon your completion of our program? Will you be studying another subject at the college? For example, child development, computer science, maybe nursing. Will you be studying for your citizenship, naturalization course and test and interview because a goal of yours is to become an American citizen? Will you be working in another job or in the same job in the same company or position you have, but maybe in a more advanced role, doing things that you weren't doing before as a result of your increased proficiency in English? So have that in the back of your mind. And of course, we're going to tie in your own personal goals and professional goals that you have, and you will be addressing those using this grammar construction. So let's go ahead and dive in. If you have your your textbooks with you, go ahead and open them to page 88 in the textbook. I'm just going to go over the construction of both the future perfect and the future perfect progressive. Okay, so we'll go over all the elements of how to form those two tenses, and then also how to form yes or no questions, WH questions, and then the short answer responses that we often give to yes or no questions. We'll go into the context for which we use the future perfect, as well as the future perfect progressive. Look at several examples. I'll touch a little bit on the third grammar note in terms of how both the future perfect and future perfect progressive can be used together with the simple present in a time clause, and we'll be reacquainted with our good friend by to indicate those time clauses. And then the next learning lecture, we'll go over Rule 4, the use of adverbs or expressions with by to demonstrate the order of events using the future perfect or future perfect progressive. And then at the end of this video, we will go over together exercises 1 and exercise 2 on pages 92 and 93 of the textbook. So let's take it back here. Page 88. Here are the elements, the ingredients, if you will, of the future perfect. Now, with the past perfect, I'm just going to go back very briefly just so we can kind of understand where we're coming from. With the past perfect, because these two look very similar to each other, the only difference is instead of future, past, right? Now all the other elements are essentially going to be the same. So if we look at the construction of the past perfect, we have the subject, followed by the auxiliary verb to have. And because we're speaking in the past perfect, we are using the past form of the verb to have, which would be had. So subject, had, and then what we call the past participle of the main verb. And to form the past participle, for most verbs, all we do is add the suffix ed. And that is how we construct the past perfect. Subject, past form of the verb to have, this is our helping verb, and then the past participle of the main verb, whatever the main action is. Okay? And for the past perfect progressive, the only change is been, which is the past of the form, the past participle of the verb to be. And then the main verb is in the base form, but because we're expressing that verb in the progressive form, we're adding the suffix ing to demonstrate that this past action is being in progress, or is being viewed or recounted as in progress. Okay, so that's where we started. Boy, seems like a long time ago, but only just about a month or a month and a half ago. This is where we began our time together talking about the past perfect and past perfect progressive. Now let's fast forward now to where we are now, back to Unit 6. And the future perfect progressive. Here are the elements. Very similar, just some minor changes to the helping verb, right? What we call the auxiliary verb. And then the verb to have is going to be in the base form. So, starting off with the subject, because we're expressing a future event, we're using the auxiliary verb will for all subjects. Have, base form of the auxiliary verb to have, and then we're still using the past participle of the main verb. Remember those irregular past participles. I'll pull them up in just a moment, but a reminder that you can go to page 453. Perhaps you're already looking there. I find myself looking there many times. There is a lengthy list, dozens of irregular past participles. So I'm sure that you're referring to page 453 and 54 quite frequently. Us native speakers would be wise to do the same. Okay, so that is how we construct the future perfect. Yes or no questions. You know by now when we ask yes or no questions, we begin with an auxiliary verb. The verb to have, the verb to do, the verb to be. In this case, will, the auxiliary modal will, followed by the subject, and then the base form of the verb to have, followed by the past participle. So essentially the same syntax as a statement. Syntax is all of the order of all the parts of speech in a clause or a sentence. Same syntax as a statement, we're just switching the subject and the auxiliary modal will. For a yes or no question, we can give a short answer response in the affirmative, yes, followed by the subject and will, and only needing the base form of the verb to have. And then in a negative, no, subject, and then won't. And I think it's a bit formal to include the base form of the verb to have, and that's why they have it in parentheses there as to whether or not you include it. I think in more informal settings, in most all settings in which you're going to be using English, not necessary to include have as well. WH questions are going to begin with a WH word. Who, what, when, where, why, how. We also call those interrogatives because they're soliciting more details, more information. So, interrogative or WH word followed by will, subject, the verb to have, main verb, or base form of the verb to have, and then your past participle. All right, so that is the future perfect to express events, going back to our objectives here, our outcomes, that will have happened. We put that in the future perfect. That will have happened by a specific time in the future. By the time I graduate, by the time you graduate from ESL at LMC, you will have taken more than 10 classes, likely, of ESL. You will have read hundreds of pages out of the textbook, right? You will have taken pages upon pages upon pages of notes. You will have spent countless hours investing in your own future and well-being as a resident in this country. So that is the future perfect, and now we'll take a look at the future perfect progressive. Very similar construction as the future perfect. You have the subject, followed by will, followed by have, and then the addition that we're making, because this is a progressive action, we're adding the past participle of the verb to be, which is been, followed by the base form of the main verb, and then the suffix ing. And because it's a progressive action, a continuous action, we're always going to have a time clause, right? We're always going to have, or I would say most often we will have, some sort of reference to duration, right? For a certain amount of time, right? A time clause. And that's because it's a progressive or continuous action taking place in the future. The construction of a yes or no question, very similar. Beginning with will, followed by the subject, the verb to have, the past participle of the verb to be, and then the main verb, followed by the suffix ing. Same responses as the present perfect, although, yeah, exactly the same. And whether or not you include the verb have is up to you, not necessary. And then with WH questions, those interrogatives, followed by the auxiliary verb will, your subject, and then the verb to have, past participle of the verb to be, and then your main verb plus ing. So to go back and to think about your own personal goals, by the time you finish your ESL at LMC Experience, when you finish your ESL studies, you will have been studying English for, well, at least 2 years, perhaps longer, if you began studying English in your home country. Maybe you studied it in high school, or maybe you were studying English at the adult school. So you could say, when I finish studying ESL at LMC, I will have been, right? I will have been studying English for maybe 4 or 5 years, if you include the time at adult school, right? Or any time prior to your arrival in the United States, or maybe even on your own, since you've been in this country. When I finish ESL at LMC, I will have been living in the United States for 7 years, for example. And again, we're always going to have a time clause. One more example that I can think of for you: by the time I finish my ESL at LMC Experience, I will have been learning study habits, habits of mind, online skills, how to take an online class. I will have been learning to learn as a student for at least 2 years or even longer. So those are some examples of the future perfect progressive. Grammar notes here: 1 for the future perfect, and I'll try to go a bit quicker. I know the video is, forgive me, taking a little bit longer than I had anticipated. We'll get to the practice here in just a moment. But let's go over the grammar notes here for the future perfect and future perfect progressive. Use the future perfect to show that something will happen before a specific time in the future. So it's just the opposite of the past perfect. The past perfect is to show that something had happened before a specific time in the past, right? So these X marks would be to the left of the indicator of the present. But since we're referring to the future, it's something that will happen before a specific time in the past. So by next week, he will have achieved his goal. By next week is our time clause. By is the indicator for a time clause. Next week, he will have achieved his goal. So this is indicating that something, achieving his goal, will happen before a specific time in the future. And the focus again is on the completion of an action or situation. She will have started her new product, to sell her new product by May. So by May is our specific time, and then we're demonstrating a completed action that is taking place before a specific time, by May. And notice the construction: will, have, and then past participle of the main verb. I'll have been in college for a year by then. By then, I'll have been. Have, and then remember, been is the past participle of the verb to be. Still future perfect, not future perfect progressive here. Will have learned. Notice these are conjunctions here of she and will, I and will, we and will. Will have learned a lot by the end of this class. But that's certainly the hope. By the end of this class, it's a specific time in the future, and then a completed action that will have happened before. Future perfect progressive is just adding that additional element of the main verb and the past participle of the verb to be. We use the future perfect progressive to show that something will be in progress until a specific time in the future. So that there's a relationship between specific time in the future and then whatever that action is that will be in progress until that time, and actually may continue after that time as well. And the focus, if the focus of the future perfect is on the completion of that action, the focus in the future perfect progressive is on the continuation or the progression of that action or situation. Examples. I start my job at the computer store tomorrow. But what about our trip in May? By May is our specific time in the future. By May, marked by a time clause, I'll have been working for 6 months. So that's our specific time in the future. And then the action that will be in progress until that time, and plausibly thereafter as well, is what's expressed in the future perfect progressive. I'll have been working for 6 months. Will, have, past participle of the verb to be, will have, verb to be in the past participle, and then main verb in the ing suffix, progressive form. Another example, he opened his business in 2016. By next June, he'll have been selling. He will have been selling computer software for several years. This is the specific time. And this is in the simple past here, not in the future. So technically the specific time, the textbook, the specific time could be in reference to something that happened in the past as well. But this moment in the future that they're referring to, that there's a continuous future action that extends beyond the past, beyond the present, and into the future. So this example is a little bit different because that first time marker is in the past. Continuous action, have been selling, all the way through that specific time in the future, and as the grammar rule says, it may continue after that time as well. As we looked at before with the past perfect, past perfect progressive, we do not use, for most non-action verbs, we do not use the future perfect progressive. We can't say have been owning, for example. To own is a non-action verb. All right, we're getting a little long here on the video, and I want to make sure that we get to some practice. So we're going to do exercise 2 first. And I have that pulled up here in the 2-page format. So for exercise 2 on page 92, let's take a look at Debbie's timeline. Debbie Hart has a lot of goals. Look at her timeline and write sentences describing what Debbie will have done. And this is future perfect. Or won't have done. Still also future perfect. Will have done or won't have done by the year 2022. So, for example, by the time Debbie finds an affordable apartment, that's here, she will already have started college. She'll already have started college. That action will be completed in the future in relation to this specific time in the future. So, will have, and then done is going to be replaced by the past participle of this second verb here in parentheses. And then already, as we saw when we were covering the past perfect and past perfect progressive, already is going to go between will and have. That's where already wants to be. Yet is going to want to be at the very end. Yet will be at the very end when a negative future perfect, negative sentence with the future perfect is used. Won't have, and then again the past participle, and then yet is going to go at the end. But in the affirmative, already will go in the beginning, or in the middle, just like how you see there in that example. So we're going to do the first 3 together. I'll pause and then read to you the correct answers 4 through 10. Actually, maybe we'll do the first 5. That way the first half guided, and then the second half you can do on your own, and I'll provide the answers after I pause. So, referring to the timeline, by the time Debbie finds an affordable apartment and getting married, let's see, finds an affordable apartment and then getting married isn't going to come until much thereafter, so we're going to use won't have. By the time Debbie finds an affordable apartment, she won't have, and remember the verb to get has an irregular past participle. Let me pause here for a moment. So remember on page 453 that you have your irregular past participles here. So past participle of the verb to get would be gotten. Gotten or got. So going back to number 2, by the time Debbie finds an affordable apartment, she won't have gotten married yet. Yet, at the very end of that sentence. By the time Debbie starts college, And then spending a summer in France. Looks like that comes after, so not quite yet. Won't have done. By the time Debbie starts college, she won't have spent. Verb to spend should be on page 454. And there it is, spent. She won't have spent a summer in France yet. Yet for our negative future perfects. All right, a couple more and then I'll pause and then give you the answers to numbers 6 through 10. For number 4, by the time Debbie graduates from college, sorry about that. By the time Debbie graduates from college, she will have found, or she will already have found an apartment. Right? Because she graduates college, and this is something that she will already have done. By the time Debbie graduates from college, she will, or she'll, already have found an affordable apartment. All right, number 5, and then we'll pause here for you to finish 6 through 10 on your own. By the time Debbie spends a summer in France, she will already have found a job at the bank. By the time Debbie spends a summer in France, she'll, or she will, already have found a job at the bank. No, sorry, opposite. Forgive me. That happens after. My apologies. She won't have found. She won't have found a job at the bank yet. My apologies there. All right, I'll give you a moment. Pause here so you can finish 6 through 10 using the timeline, indicating if Debbie will have or won't have done these life events in relationship to particular periods in her life. All right, everybody, correct answers for numbers 6 through 10. Number 6, by the time Debbie graduates from college, she will have created a new banking app. She will have already created a new banking app. By the time Debbie gets married, she will, let's see here, she will have graduated, she will have, or will already have, graduated from college by the time she gets married. Number 8, by the time Debbie moves to Miami, she won't have bought a house yet. By the time Debbie moves to Miami, she won't have bought a house yet. By the time Debbie becomes a parent, she will already have graduated from college. By the time Debbie becomes a parent, she'll, or she will, already have graduated from college. And by the time Debbie buys a house, she won't. She won't have become a parent yet. All right, now here to exercise 1. And before I continue to exercise 1, forgive me, y'all, I neglected to go over with you first the statements for exercise 2 that we need to create first. And by virtue of doing exercise 3, you will have gotten these already. But going a little out of order here, to create the future perfect for these main verbs, Debbie will have started college. Debbie will have gotten married. Debbie will have found an affordable apartment. Debbie will have moved to Miami. Debbie will have spent a summer in France. Debbie will have started working at a bank. Debbie will have created a new app for online banking. Debbie will have bought a house. Debbie will have graduated from college. And Debbie will have become a parent. And then those are the phrases that we see used here in exercise 3 with the time markers already, the adverbs rather, already and yet. Already for affirmative statements and yet for negative. All right, wrapping up this video, exercise 1. Read each numbered statement from members of a high school club for young entrepreneurs and choose the sentence A or B that is similar in meaning. So, for example, number 1, by the end of this month, our company will have been doing computer repairs for 2 years. This is using the present perfect progressive. Will have been doing. Will have past participle of the verb to be, and then the main verb in the ing form, in the progressive form. So yeah, by the end of this month, that's our specific time, in this case in the future, our company will have been doing computer repairs for 2 years. So by the end of the month, it'll be our 2-year anniversary, right? And that is the same as the first statement. The team of students started their business almost 2 years ago. They'll be completing 2 years by the end of the month. Number 2, meanwhile, our computer classes for seniors will have started. That's future perfect. So, will have started by the end of the month means that they haven't quite started yet because it's a completed action. A completed action that has yet to take place because we're talking about the end of the month. You need to keep a close eye on that time clause. So if it hasn't happened yet, then we're going to use the first statement. The students haven't started teaching the classes yet. If it were in the present progressive, then we can say that it's already been taking place. the future perfect progressive. All right, number 3, our company is We Are Tees. By the next meeting, we'll have finished designing a new t-shirt. We have a time clause here. And we will have finished is future perfect. And that's by the end of the meeting. So the students will work on the t-shirt, design while, during, while they are at the meeting? No. They will work on the design before the next meeting, by the next meeting, by meaning before they will have finished. So already completed prior, not during. So the correct answer for number 3 is B. Number 4, by the time we graduate, we'll have been selling our t-shirts for the same price for 3 years. Now, we know if we have 4 that we're going to use what? The future perfect progressive, right? Will have been selling. Subject, will, have, been, past participle of the verb to be, main verb, plus ing. Present perfect progressive because we're indicating a progressive action. How long with the time clause something has been taking place. Same price for 3 years. The t-shirts will be the same price when the students graduate. There's no indication of a price change, so not higher. Will be the same price is key. Correct answer for number 4A. All right, final 2. Number 5, we have a new company. Our time clause there. And remember that when we begin with the time clause, we always have a comma that comes right after it. By 12 noon tomorrow, we will have selected our company's name. That is future perfect. The students know what the name of the company will be. Don't have the name yet. We're going to figure that out by noon tomorrow, right? We don't know the name yet. We'll know tomorrow by noon. Correct answer for number 5 is B. And number 6, I won't have completed our team's business plan by noon. Will not have completed is future perfect. And by noon is our time marker, our time clause. So 5 and 6 are very similar. The students will still be working at noon, or the students will finish at noon. You know, it's kind of hard to tell the difference between those two. I won't have completed our team's business plan by noon. We can assume that they'll still be working, right, if they haven't completed. So we know for sure that letter A is not correct because they won't be done by noon. We can assume that they will still be working by noon since we know that they will not have been finished. All right, so that is exercises 1, 2, and you're welcome. I gave you a little bit of 3 as well, so some bonus coverage there. My apologies that this video was so lengthy, but I wanted to make sure that we drew relationships between what we covered at the beginning of the year, or semester rather, and then what we're covering now. The difference, rather than the past, referring to future events in relation to a specific time.